In 1866, Prussia and Austria fought a war over the leadership of the German Confederation. After 2 months and 20,000 deaths, Prussia came out victorious and dissolved the German Confederation to form their own Northern German Confederation. Over in France, the French wanted to take advantage of what they assumed to be a weak nation and declared war. Prussia once again was victorious, and the war ended with the capture of Paris. Another major result of the war was the formation of the German Empire in January 1871, with Prussian King Wilhelm I as its emperor. The newly formed state did not only get their first emperor, alongside him also came his wife Augusta as the first German Empress. We covered the first part of Augusta's life in last week's video, so today we will continue with what happened after she became the first German Empress. Augusta despised the title of Empress and thought of it to sound more extraordinary than it was. In addition, Augusta had quite some differences with German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, who had played an important role when founding the German Empire. Augusta condemned Bismarck's culture struggles, in which he fought against the Catholic control of education. She was a supporter of the Pope and wrote many letters to her husband, the Emperor, in which she demanded the end of the so-called Kulturkampf. The struggle lastly came to an end in 1878, and Augusta viewed this as a personal success over Bismarck. Only after these years, Augusta slowly began to bury her differences with Bismarck. She would even call him a genius statesman. Augusta thought of Bismarck to be the best tutor for her beloved grandson, Wilhelm. Only he could prepare Wilhelm for the throne he would one day succeed to. As the younger Wilhelm had a bad relationship with his own mother, Victoria, he got closer to his grandmother, Augusta. Rumors therefore began to spread that Augusta thought of Wilhelm to be more suitable to the throne than her own son Frederick. With increasing age, Augusta did not spend much time at the court in Berlin as she used to do. In fact, she only resided there from November to April. The rest of the year was spent in Koblenz and Baden, where she would visit her daughter Louise. In 1881, the 70-year-old Empress slipped and fell and was seriously injured. From that point on, she required crutches and a wheelchair. However, this did not stop her from fulfilling her duties. On the 90th birthday of her husband in 1887, she renewed her vows with him. The following year, in 1888, her husband Wilhelm died, and only 99 days later she witnessed the death of her son Frederick. She consequently saw her beloved grandson Wilhelm become the German emperor. Augusta, who had long suffered from rheumatism, died on January 7, 1890, at the age of 78. She most likely was killed by the so-called Russian flu, which was a pandemic in the years 1889 to 1890. The first German empress was buried beside her husband in Castle Charlottenburg. Following the death of Wilhelm I, his son Frederick ascended to the imperial throne. Frederick was married to Victoria, the eldest daughter of Queen Victoria and her prince consort Albert. Victoria Adelaide Mary Louisa was born on November 21, 1840, as the eldest child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. She was baptized at her birthplace, Buckingham Palace, 3 months after her birth. 1 month before that, she was granted the title of Princess Royal. Victoria's parents made sure to enable her the best education possible. At the age of 18 months, she began learning French, and at the age of 4, she began studying German. Her father personally taught the young princess philosophy and politics. Through this, she most likely gained her liberal views. Victoria was an interested and excellent student, always hungry for more knowledge. In 1851, the British royal family was visited by the Prussian royal family alongside their children, Frederick and Louisa, on occasion of the Great Exhibition. There, the 11-year-old Victoria met her future husband Frederick for the first time. She guided him through the exhibition in perfect German, while the Prussian prince was only able to speak a few words in English. The first meeting was a success. Frederick was especially fascinated that Victoria shared his liberal views. The Prussian prince visited London 4 years later and asked for her hand in marriage within 3 days of his arrival. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were thrilled but wanted the young couple to wait until Victoria turned 17. The wedding took place on January 25, 1858. Victoria had a difficult start at the strict and conservative Prussian court. In addition, she weekly received letters from her mother with high demands she could not live up to. Victoria was forced to fulfill official duties almost every day. At 7 in the morning, she had to receive people at court and was expected to attend formal dinners late at night. At first, the couple settled in the old wing of the Berlin Royal Palace. However, the rooms were in bad condition, and so they moved to the Crown Prince's Palace in late 1858. At that point, Victoria was already pregnant with her first child. She gave birth to the future Wilhelm II on January 27, 1859, in a difficult delivery which almost cost the life of mother and child. 7 more children would follow. In early 1861, Frederick's father ascended to the Prussian throne, making the young couple the Crown Prince and Princess of Prussia. However, Wilhelm I was suspicious of his son and daughter-in-law and did not share their liberal views. He limited Frederick's allowance and only allowed them to travel within Prussia without permission. That same year, in December, Victoria's beloved father, Prince Albert, died of typhoid fever. Victoria was heartbroken and traveled to the United Kingdom with Frederick for his funeral. Over the span of the next few years, Frederick and Victoria more and more became outsiders. The conflict between Frederick and his father reached its height when in 1863 Frederick publicly criticized his father's and his prime minister's policies. Wilhelm I threatened his son to dismiss him from his military duties and even exclude him from the line of succession. While the Crown Prince and Princess increasingly got unpopular in Prussia, they were celebrated in the UK. Upon Wilhelm I becoming the first German emperor in 1871, Frederick and Victoria became the German Crown Prince and Princess. It would take 17 more years until Frederick would ascend to the imperial and Prussian throne. However, when Frederick became German emperor and king of Prussia, he was terminally ill with cancer. The new emperor and empress only had time to make a few political actions like declaring amnesty to all political prisoners. 99 days after his ascension, Frederick III was dead, and Victoria was heartbroken. Their son, Wilhelm, now became the new German emperor. Victoria and Wilhelm did not share a close relationship. He in fact was influenced by the conservative rulership of his grandfather, Wilhelm I. He demanded that Victoria move out of the new palace, and so she began the building of Friedrichshof in Kronberg. There she would settle until her death. Victoria's last years were spent lonely between Germany and the UK, where she would visit her elderly mother. Suffering from breast cancer since 1898, Victoria died at Friedrichshof on August 5, 1901. She is buried in the Friedenskirche in Potsdam next to her beloved husband. When Frederick III died in 1888, his son Wilhelm II followed onto the throne. He was married to Augusta Victoria of Schleswig-Holstein, the last German empress in history. Augusta Victoria, who in her family was simply known as Donna, was born on October 22, 1858. Augusta's mother was a niece to Queen Victoria through her half-sister Feodora of Leiningen. At the time of her birth, her family lived at Dolzig Castle, which is today a part of Poland. There, Augusta enjoyed a quiet childhood with her 6 siblings. When Augusta Victoria was 11 years old, her family moved over to Castle Primkenau, which her father inherited. Augusta met her future husband Wilhelm for the first time in 1868, and from 1878 on they had frequent friendly contact, but a marriage between the two was unthinkable at that time. Wilhelm initially proposed to his cousin, Princess Elizabeth of Hesse and by Rhine, but she declined. And for Augusta herself, she fell in love with Prince Ernst of Saxe-Meiningen, but her parents were against the marriage between the two of them. Wilhelm, still deeply upset by the refusal of Elizabeth, was desperate to quickly get engaged to Augusta Victoria. Wilhelm's grandfather initially did not agree on the marriage, as Augusta had one great-grandmother that had been a commoner and one grandmother that was only a countess. Further, Augusta's father was in a year-long dispute with Prussia over the Duchy of Schleswig-Holstein. But with the support of Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, Wilhelm finally got his way. The couple got engaged shortly after the death of Augusta's father in 1880. A year later, on February 27, 1881, the wedding in Berlin took place. A little over a year later, the couple's first child was born, Wilhelm, who would later become the next crown prince. 6 more children followed in the next 10 years. Eitel Friedrich in 1883, Adalbert in 1884, August Wilhelm in 1887, Oskar in 1888, Joachim in 1890, and after 6 sons, Victoria Louise was born in 1892. Augusta had a quite strained relationship with her mother-in-law, Victoria. Victoria initially had hopes that Augusta would help her reconcile with her son Wilhelm, but this was not the case. In fact, the opposite happened. The bad tension between the two was probably mostly to blame on Augusta, who fully supported her husband in every situation, and as he did not like his own mother, Augusta did neither. Augusta would often go on and snub against her mother-in-law. The relationship between the two women in Wilhelm's life improved when on June 15, 1888, Wilhelm and Augusta became the next German Emperor and Empress and the next King and Queen of Prussia. With Wilhelm now Emperor, Augusta was often left alone with her mother-in-law. They slowly approached each other over the years, and the two were often seen riding in a carriage together. However, the conservative Augusta never left one of her children alone with her mother-in-law, as she feared that she might influence them with her liberal views. As Empress, Augusta always had her husband's back and was his biggest supporter. Wilhelm would often suffer depressed phases throughout his life, and it was his wife who brought light into his life in these situations. Augusta did not look away from the people in her country that were suffering as they worked long hours in the German factories. Although she was as conservative as her husband and was against liberalizing the empire, she would often visit the people at their home and bring them fresh food. Throughout her time as empress, she was convinced that the monarchy was God-given. As deeply religious as Augusta Victoria was, she saw that there were not enough churches in Berlin, and so she initiated the building of 66 new churches over the time span of 26 years. With women at that time mostly being at home and caring for their children, she started giving them jobs within the churches. Further, the Empress founded the Women's Help Organization in 1899, which is still active to this day. The organization provided cooking courses and courses all around childcare. Augusta saw the high mortality, which was around 30% back then, and founded an infant clinic in Berlin. Augusta provided info books to young parents in which childcare was explained. For her social engagement, Augusta gained popularity within Germany and was more liked than her husband. When in 1914 the First World War broke out, everybody was positive that it would end in a victory for Germany. Back then, Germany had one of the mightiest armies of the world, and the people of Berlin, spurred by patriotism, supported the imperial family, cheering at them in front of the Berlin Palace. Augusta waved from the balcony to her people on that day. Augusta was a supporter of the war, although it is important to mention that this was common back then. During the warfare, Wilhelm began to suffer as he saw the end coming near. Augusta would visit her husband at his headquarters to further support him. However, Germany's defeat was unstoppable. The people of Germany were tired and hungry after 4 years of war, and Wilhelm's last straw probably was when US President Woodrow Wilson declined peace negotiations with him directly. Wilson demanded for a representative of the people to be sent to the negotiations. Augusta was desperate to keep the monarchy upright. However, on November 9, 1918, Chancellor Maximilian of Baden announced the abdication of Wilhelm II and the Crown Prince. Wilhelm was forced into exile while Augusta refused to leave Berlin. But soon, Augusta was also forced to leave the country following the November Revolution in Germany. She and Wilhelm were granted exile by Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands and moved into House Doorn. Augusta never recovered from the downfall of the monarchy, and neither did the couple's youngest son, Joachim. Joachim died of suicide after he could not accept his new status as a commoner. Augusta died the following year on April 11, 1921. Her last sentences were, "I cannot die. I cannot leave the emperor alone." Augusta Victoria spent almost her whole life supporting her husband and holding up the monarchy. The news of the empress' death in exile reached Germany with great shock. Her body was transferred back to Germany, the country she devoted her whole life to. As Wilhelm was banned from Germany, he could only attend the coffin of his late wife until the border. Thousands of people gathered in the streets as they took farewell from their former empress. She was buried in the antique temple in Potsdam. Wilhelm spent the rest of his life in the Netherlands and witnessed the outbreak of World War II. He never entered Germany again and died over 20 years later on June 4, 1941. He is buried in Doorn, which means that Augusta and her beloved husband are buried in two different countries.